going to very briefly introduce Bouke because I want you all to hear from him. Thank you all for joining us, but thank you especially to Bouke for being with us, Bouke is joining us from London. So he is staying up late so that we could do this virtual happy hour, and we are really grateful to have this experience with you. Bouke is an artist that I've been following for a really long time, and I think that he is one of the most exciting figures in contemporary ceramics. And I'm so excited we were able to bring worn pieces to Pittsburgh. Bouke hails from the Netherlands, but has lived and worked in London, where he's joining us, for the past 35 years. And he started his career in fashion before switching gears to ceramics conservation. And that practice really influenced his artistic career, which I know that he will share more about when we get into the Q&A as well. I think he began creating art full-time, I think in 2010. So developing this really distinctive approach that is full of wit and thought and a reverence for the material that you work with that comes across. So first, we'll start with just having you share your space and tell us where you are physically.
Hello, everybody. I'm with you here from London. Unfortunately, I couldn't come to Pittsburgh for War and Pieces because of the pandemic. But I'm glad that modern technology allows us to do things like this. So we're here in my home. I work and live in the same place. I've got a fantastic house and for London, a very big 120-foot garden in which I was able to build a studio. So I'm just starting here in the house and then walk with you to the studio, my daily commute. And I'm just going to turn the camera around so you can see some things in the house. And this is actually a good thing to start with. This is one of the very first things I made. I collect, this is all 17th and 18th century white Delftware. And it's a material that I love. It's from my home country. And you all know the blue and white Delft. And this is exactly the same, but without the blue. And this was made for everyday use for the peasants and the laborers in the cities. And these are all everyday objects of use, like plates, pharmacy jars, teacups, bleeding shaving bowls, ointment pots. These cows, they were made for dairy shops as points of advertising sales. And this just was everyday use. And most of these things you can see have all got damage to them because they actually, I say about 80% of this collection has been dug up in the ground in Holland, which is something I love very much. And rather than restoring it like the restorer I am, I just left the damage shown. And this is sort of, I did this all before I really started making my own things. And part of the thing that I do with the broken ceramics is showing that damage can be beautiful too. And like, I think these plates with the damage, and on here I've done a little gold repair based on the Japanese technique of kintsugi. I still think it's a beautiful object, whether it's perfect or not. And this is a piece that I will never sell because I love seeing it every day when I get up in the morning, when I come downstairs. And the colors, you probably can't see from where you are with the lighting and everything, but it's supposed to be white Delft, but white is never white. So some of them have got a blue tinge, a pink tinge, a green tinge, and it's just so many nuances. And when the light changes, the colors always change. And so this is my living space. And I'll just show you a few pieces here in this cabinet. Here is the very first piece I made when I started. And this was like one of those things that we all have broken things and they end up in a cupboard and nothing happens with them and never, but you sort of can't bear to throw them out. And this was a little figure that my partner had bought for me of a Dutch boy on the 26th Street flea market in New York. And it got broken in a move and I couldn't be bothered to restore it. And then I started thinking of making my own work. I thought, well, let's celebrate the damage. And this idea of using it on suspended little perspex dowels is sort of something that comes out from my background as restoration. Because sometimes when they have archaeological pots where there's some fragments missing, but they have a fragment that sits in the missing area, would be sitting in the missing area. They make up the whole of the rest of the pot, but they suspend the separate fragment, which has no surrounding fragments, in the space where it would be, so you could get an idea of how the pot would look. And so this is the little Dutch boy, and I added a little heart that I imagined came out of the figure. And that's the very first thing I made. And because I had a background as a ceramics conservator, I used techniques and skills and material knowledge that I'd built up over the years as a ceramics restorer conservator. So I developed my techniques and skills in making these things very quickly. And I think it's important when you do such delicate work that the quality of the skills, it's very important for the overall effect of the piece. And then next to it, it's just here you can have a bit of wit and amusement. So this is a 17th century figure of Guanyin, Chinese, and Guanyin is the goddess of mercy and compassion from Buddhist tradition. And the heads of the figures were missing, and another figure here was missing, and it looked to me like a family group. And I sort of thought of what an archetypal family group, and the Simpsons were to me a very archetypal family group. And I think Marge Simpson is sort of like a modern sort of like interpretation of a goddess of compassion. Oops. And there's some other pieces in here, but I'll take you to my studio now. My daily commute. This is actually another very nice piece. This is a 2,000-year-old Han Dynasty figure from China, and these were made to go in tombs engraved with like the terracotta soldiers, but much smaller. And they all are armless because they would have been made out of wood, and they would have been wearing silk robes, and there would have been thousands and thousands of them. But of course, the clothes and the silk, the arms and the wood have rotted away, so they end up as these monolithic, armless figures. And I have combined it here with these broken bowls that come, Chinese bowls from the 17th century that were excavated from a shipwreck off the coast of Malaysia. And there we go. And now we go to my studio. Any questions while we walk in the dark?
Could you tell us about,
yeah.
Bouke, could you tell us about, is it kintsugi, the Japanese conception around mending broken things?
So the idea behind kintsugi is the Japanese philosophy about that was that if a beautiful object is damaged, the object is part of its history, and rather than trying to hide it, which I always thought was a bit quite strange thing to do. And I know you have to do it as a restorer, but it's all this. There's different ways of restoring. You can either make it totally invisible, or you can do a museum repair, which is much more the work that I do. And the kintsugi is the same way. You're not trying to hide it. And although I try to sort of disguise it rather than hide it, but with kintsugi, you're actually enhancing it. And here's actually another piece where I've done it on. And I think the idea, the philosophy behind it is just such a beautiful idea that something that's damaged is part of its history, and the object is still beautiful. So here we are in my studio. This is room 1 of the studio. I'll just quickly walk you through the sections. And this is actually the area, the much smaller area where actually I do most of my work, because I like the space here that I can just sit on my chair and move around to all the work surfaces. And especially in the winter, it feels very intimate and compact, and it's a really lovely way to work in. Then I also have here a cleaning area. And so it's a treat. And I must say, this space has been my refuge during the whole of the lockdown. Even it was very much lockdown going on, I could just hide away here. I walked my 50 yards from my back door to my studio, and the world could just go pass by. I have my radio on, and the world just can pass by. And actually, funnily enough, here are a few figures, individual figures, as in War and Pieces, that I actually had just been making for people as Christmas presents.
Those are fantastic.
Bouke, there's a question from someone. If you want me to say your name, just give me a thumbs up, but I won't if you don't want me to. The question was, yes, so from our Amanda Barr. Hi, Amanda. Are you using traditional, or is it Orishi lacquer for the kintsugi or something like?
No.
Okay. I'm glad you stopped me because I don't know what was coming next.
So I very occasionally do the Orishi lacquer, but it's so time consuming. And especially when you're doing pieces where you do lots of it, there's just not enough hours in the day to do it. And there's so many stages to it. You have to build up layer and layer and layer, and then drying, and you have to get the right humidity. And so I use a sort of my own version where I use an epoxy resin, which I mix with a red pigment, like the same color as the Orishi lacquer. And then I, just before it goes off, before it hardens, I use a gold leaf on top of it. And apparently some of the kintsugi masters they're still around in Japan, they sometimes do it that technique as well, because it's the same for them. The technique, it's so laborious and time consuming. So sometimes they use the easy way as well. So let me just show you a few pieces. Most of these things I've all been made during the lockdown period. Here is this is a bush, and I had it electrocuted. So the wood is still inside there, but it's metal. And at the end, all little rosebud flower buds at the end of it, all made Chinese porcelain leftover fragments that I've no use of for anybody, but I'm reutilizing them and trying to make something beautiful out of it. And then the base is a total assemblage of 18th century porcelain fragments. And on that theme of using very small fragments, here is a pair of obelisks. And this has been an idea of mine that I had for years, but I never found the right manufacturer to make them. And then finally, last year, I found this place in Scotland in the middle of nowhere on one of the lochs, and they made them for me. So these are 18th and 17th century fragments of blue and white Delftware, and they are set in resin in obelisk shape. And the quality of the work is so beautiful. There's no air bubbles. There's no imperfections. And it's as I work totally on my own. I have no assistants because I like doing everything myself. And this is one of the few occasions where somebody else actually does the work for me, which is quite a different sensation. But when you find somebody really good, then it's really a joy to work with people like that. And what was great with these people, they totally got it. They did a sample one for me. They went out to an antique shop to get a plate because they didn't want to use my fragments, and they broke it up, and they were really, really fantastic. So,
okay, I think one of the most popular questions that I've gotten asked while giving tours of War and Pieces, people always want to know if you only work with found broken pieces or if you're breaking pieces yourself.
No, I only use things that are already damaged. I sometimes may damage it a bit more, but it is ostensibly already damaged, because that's the whole point of it, because I'm not really in the business of smashing up 18th century vases. Also, it would be not a very viable practice, because the vase, for example, this pair of vases here, So these came out of a Belgian castle. There was actually 3 vases. 2 of them were very, very badly damaged, and they had been terribly badly repaired, but they were really in lots of pieces, plus the perfect one. And I had to buy, basically I had to buy the perfect one to get the 2 broken ones. And the perfect ones, I mean, I couldn't afford to smash that up because it is worth a lot of money, but I am using it as a pair. I am presenting it as a pair. So it's 1 perfect one and 1 broken, and set in the glass. And so these are called, the glass pieces are called memory vessels. And this is from an idea from, I was a student of restoration conservation, and I worked at the V&A when they were doing a new glass gallery, and I restored a Roman cinerary urn, a beautiful green glass lidded urn, which would have contained somebody's ashes. And then 15 years later, when I was starting doing my own things, I thought, what if you applied that idea of an urn containing ashes to a broken vase, where the vase contains its broken fragments, its ashes. And so the glass becomes a ghost of its original form.
Mm-hmm. Bouke,
then,
can I ask you a quick question that will take away from the pieces for 1 second, but I have to know what is in those little drawers that you keep passing by. I love little
these
drawers.
Ones?
Oh no, the drawers.
Oh, these.
Those and the ones on either side of
these.
the shelf. Yes. Yes.
So I was going to come to the drawers. So these are all full of materials. Pliers, screwdrivers, screws, drill bits, butterflies and insects, and everything. And then underneath here,
it's wonderful.
Full of my broken fragments. So this is a lovely box full of very rare 17th century fragments from a shipwreck.
Wow.
And here we have a box full of damaged 18th century tea bowls and cups.
Mm-hmm.
And then what else have we here? Nothing. Then there's, all little bits of things that I used, Who knows where that will end up one day. This is the religious drawer. And, they have then here's a special drill bits that they don't make anymore. So I bought up a whole load of stock.
Wow.
Hours of fun.
What's that?
But they're very effective, the drawers. They're very effective, the drawers.
Before Bouke moves on to other things, does anyone have any other questions about anything you've seen so far? You can type it in the chat here. I do have one question, Bouke. Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful. Yes, please talk about that. And Amanda asked again, how do you go about sourcing broken things? Is it a special relationship with auction houses and collectors?
No, not well, because I'm a restorer. I know quite a lot of dealers that I work for, and I mean, they either sometimes something gets broken that's not worth restoring. They ask me if I want to have it. I buy things from auctions. I mean, it's amazing. Chinese porcelain has become so desirable because the Chinese are buying it back now. And even whereas I was buying a broken vase for £300, they're going for £1,000, £1,500 now. And they all go back to China, and they have them restored and they sell them as perfect. So, but I can still find things, and I have people that look out for me and they tip me off. I have a semi-retired dealer in Holland. He goes to all the auctions in Holland, and when he sees something, he sends me a phone, a WhatsApp with a picture of it, which is just amazing, the modern technology that can do those things, because you can find things that you would never ever get to know about. So, and then I go look out myself as well, and I look at auction sites, and you know, here, there, everywhere. And so the fragments from the shipwreck, I found this guy on the internet that was selling them. He had a permission to excavate some ships of the Malaysian coast from the Malaysian government. And so I asked him, have you got any sort of fragments or damaged ones? Because that's what I'm interested in. And that's what mostly he can't get rid of because people don't want it. So, you know, you build up your little networks. And
I'm sure you have built up lots of networks.
So this is what I call, this is my self-portrait. Sort of my head spilling out with broken ceramic, from my head being pulled open and spilling out with ceramic fragments. And here is one of my still lifes.
Mm.
As a Dutch person, you sort of like, you know, your whole life you're surrounded by still life in calendars, prints on walls, museums, they're all full with it. And so I'm trying to do my own three-dimensional versions of them and then use the butterflies. So in Dutch still life, all insects have meanings. And the butterfly in a Dutch still life is a sign for Christ, for the resurrection, for rebirth. And so I think my piece, my works are sort of a rebirth from the broken fragments. And above it, there's a piece I just finished. This is going to be a new series of smashed plates. And so the rock is hitting the plates and smashing it out. And it's also an idea that I've been sitting on for ages. And during lockdown, I've really found the time to actually ask people and finding somebody who could make a beautiful mound. So it could fix to the wall perfectly without you noticing. And I found this guy in the east of London. And again, somebody who totally gets what you're doing and total master of his skills and delivering a fantastic product for me. So I go and see him with all the broken fragments. I tell them how I want them arranged, and then he makes a beautiful mound. So the rock actually sort of it's also it's nearly off. Anyway, so that comes off, and there's a cute little plate behind it. The plate comes off, and so it's easy to transport as well. And then he's done beautifully with a screw thread inside. So it's something I couldn't do myself, and to actually find somebody who can do that, I get a real kick out of that.
That is very clever.
And so we have all bits and pieces sitting around, waiting for things to happen with them.
We have a really great question from one of our docents asking how you conceive of your artworks. Do you have a vision? Do you draw? Or do you let the broken fragments lead the way?
I was just going into the next room. So most of the time, I let the broken fragments lead me. I never do any drawings. I just let it go. So I've just on my desk here is a Tang Dynasty, which is 7th to 9th century AD, little camel. And I will start on that this week, but I don't quite know yet which way it's going to go. There's several possibilities, but that just happens as I'm doing it. And that was very much how I worked in the beginning. I was really buying things, and they always had to be beautiful things of really good quality. And then sometimes I didn't know what to do with them, and they sit on the shelf for a year, sometimes 3 years, and then suddenly an idea comes up. But it's usually the object that gives the idea. Whereas with the glass vessels, that's the concept now, and I know what I'm doing. So when I find a beautiful vase that is of good quality, and I think this would make a good piece, then I don't really have to think about it any further. But then sometimes I play around with it, because for this one, this is a Dutch delft drug jar, and I add an extra layer like the colour parchment, which they would have had, and a wax seal on the side. You know, so play around within the concept.
Bouke, can I ask, well, one more technical question from someone in the audience, and then perhaps, John, we can move on to the War and Pieces part of the conversation. Someone asked if you use any special adhesive, how you glue everything together or keep everything.
I use about 4, 5, 6 different adhesives. Every material has its own adhesive, really. And every project, every job that I do, they might need a different approach. So for these glass vessels, I use glue because it holds really quickly and it has a certain flexibility within it. So that works really well with that, and also with this. So this here, I just want to, before we finish the tour in the studio. So this is a map of China, made of China. So it's all 18th century fragments of porcelain, and so China, made with China. And very importantly, I've already got into trouble with it. Here is Taiwan. I did another version of it, and when I posted it just as the map, I got so many comments from Chinese people. Where is Taiwan? Where is Taiwan? You have to put Taiwan on it. So here we have Taiwan, and this is another island. It's actually a bigger island called, oh God, Hoi Chun Island. So yes, so back to glues. So for other things, when I'm sticking fragments together, here we have, I needed to build, this rim was so fragmented, so I needed to stick some fragments together to get a larger fragment. There I use an epoxy for, so it's just every project I decide on what is the most suitable adhesive, but there is lots of different ones. And of course, because of my job as a restorer, I use adhesive specially made for restoration. And so there's one here that I use, and what's important about it is that it's got really good aging properties, because most epoxy resins will go yellow very soon, but these specific ones, they will keep a clear appearance for a very long time. But they're very tricky to use, and you have to measure them on scales with 2 decimal points. You have to go to 1/100th of a gram to get it right, because if you use too much, it will yellow very quickly as well, and if you use too little, it won't harden. So these are all sort of knowledge that I've built up over the years.
It's all of the technical things you need to know to create all of this.
Here's some. I still do a little bit of restoration work for my oldest, bestest customer. So I'm doing a whole set of porcelain plates at the moment.
Wow. Wonderful. Well, Bouke, yes. if you're ready to talk about a little bit about War and Pieces, Don. Yeah. Oh, there he is. Look, everyone, it's the voice.
I'm back again.
Thank you. That was. I could look at that forever and ever, right, Don?
Yes, we had a studio visit a few months ago, and I think we saw your model, the background of China getting started. I don't think you had.
You did get it. It was just about to start it. Yes.
I'm amazed at how much you've created in the last few months, and it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I have to say, it's not a bad job, really. It's pretty nice. It's like.
Well, I think.
And at this horrible period, it has been, really quite nice, and also because things are a bit quieter, I have had more time to spend on things. Even in my restoration work, where normally I would say, okay, this is good enough. Now I've got a few objects here at the back that this jug. So the whole neck of this. Oh no! I just turned it around quickly. The whole neck of this jug was missing, and I really spent time on it. And even if I don't charge for it, it was just the pleasure of having the time to go over it and over again till I was really happy. Anyway, War and Pieces.
Yeah, so everyone always wants to know how it started. So this as a commission from a contemporary art museum and something that you didn't intend to travel for so long.
No, so what happened was, it was very early on when I started making my own things, and I had my first show, which was at the department store Selfridges in the Wonder Room, which is a very, very good space of emerging talent. And I was in that show, and they had it on their website, and the director of this museum saw it, and he just contacted me. And this museum wasn't a contemporary art museum, it's a historical museum called the Holborn Museum in Bath, and they just been starting a huge remodeling of the museum and building a new modern extension on it. And they have this amazing huge table which they normally display all the porcelain and silverware on it, and they decided that once a year they want to give it over to a contemporary artist, and I was the first one. And up till then I've been working on very much smaller pieces, domestic scale, and they said, here's 8-meter table, do what you want. And no guidance, do whatever you want. And I've always been fascinated by the big table centerpieces from the 17th and 18th century. First they were made in sugar, and then when Meissen discovered porcelain, they started making these centerpieces in porcelain, and I want to do a contemporary version of it. And I used the theme of a battle, because in Vanity Fair, the book by Thackeray, there is a scene on the eve of the Battle of Waterloo where there's a big banquet being given by the Duchess of, oh God, I forget, by a Duchess.
The Duchess of Richmond.
Richmond, God. The Duchess just had a brain freeze. And apparently it was an incredibly grand banquet ball. And during the ball, it was all announced that Napoleon's troops were advancing and everybody had to leave. And I thought, rather than having a battle, what is better than a battle in real life is just put it on the table and have the figures of sugar and porcelain fight it out with each other. And as every good table has to have a centerpiece, and I thought the most destructive thing is, of course, is a nuclear explosion and an atom bomb. But the strange thing I find about an atom bomb is when you see pictures of it, it's strangely beautiful as well. So I try to make my centerpiece, although it's a horrifying theme, I try to make it beautiful, because I quite like those contradictions. And so it was made, I got a grant from the Arts Council of England, and it was made to be shown for 3 months. And I thought, God, it's kind of shame that it's gonna be packed up and end up in boxes. And I spoke to the curator there, and he said, well, what would you like to have done? And I said, well, he said, I just off the top of my head, I mentioned Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin, because they have an amazing porcelain room and a history with ceramics, porcelain. And he said, oh, I know the curator, let me drop her an email. And they'd never done anything contemporary, but it was that year, it was the 300th anniversary of a big battle during which the palace was destroyed. And they said, God, this is perfect to fit in with what we are doing with our program. And so there it went. And since then, I think you're location number 14 or 15. And so since 2012, it's traveled pretty much continuously.
Maybe I should show for sheer scale. I'll throw up a picture of of the piece on display at the Frick.
Okay.
Sure. If anybody hasn't seen it in our venue yet, I think War and Pieces really takes on the character of the room in which it's displayed, and it's been shown in kind of white box contemporary art museum styles. It's been shown in historic palaces like Charlottenburg. And I think it has a really interesting character. I'm so delighted with how it looks in our 18th century French gallery.
Sorry, I'm having, there we go. There it is.
Yeah, it seems to adapt itself so well to every room where it's shown in.
It's just gorgeous.
I think there's a really beautiful dialogue that's happening with a lot of our 18th century paintings and with the depictions that you have within the centerpiece, including we don't it's not Waterloo, but we do have Napoleon at the Battle of Vienna on one end of the gallery there. I don't think you can see it in this particular view. I wonder if you can share a little bit about what the experience was like, because this is, we are at the 14th venue, I think.
Yeah.
And this is the first venue that you weren't present for the installation, that you didn't complete it. What was that like for you?
I shouldn't say really, it was quite a relief. Once you've done it 13 times already, and because I know, because I can handle this these objects much. I know you have to have a real duty of care with it, so I was a bit worried, because it is a bit daunting with all these broken bits and all those broken fragments. It must be quite daunting to actually have to put it all together. So, but I think we discussed it really well. I did a sort of pointer list for you, and it worked out really amazingly. And I was really amazed, because I was sitting on the day that you were installing by my phone, waiting for a panicked phone calls. Oh my God, what do we do with this? But no, it was all, I just got pictures when it was finished.
It was definitely daunting. I think we took more time as museum professionals and as art handlers. We probably took longer than you would have taken in gallery spaces.
But you sort of should, because because you have to treat these objects. You're borrowing them, so I can totally understand that you would take care of it. I'm just a bit nonchalant, and I think, well, if that gets damaged, I can always fix it.
We have a question about how it was transported, and I think that segues nicely into, I think, the second most common question that I get on tours is, how it's installed, how it's transported. So kind of talking about how you conceived of each vignette.
So it's all a bit of a trick of the eye. So all the panels on with the figures, there are 6 tableaus, and all the fragments that look like loose fragments are all attached to it. So you just lift a whole oval up and everything is fixed together. And when it's installed, like you can see here, then loose fragments get added, and that makes it look like all the other fragments are loose as well. So each tableau goes in a wooden crate, and then the mushroom cloud comes into 2 sections. The top half lifts off, and that goes in 2 boxes, and then all the loose fragments get just they travel separate in another box. So it looks more complicated than it is. And in all the traveling, I pretty much have hardly had any damages. A little one piece here and there comes off, but that really is not an issue. Also, it's not an issue because it wasn't made to last this long, so it's okay that happens.
I think one of my favorite stories that you've told about War and Pieces is there is one exception to your practice of generally working with already broken things, and all of those shards that get kind of sprinkled around each vignette. I love the story of you creating those at Holborn. If you can tell that.
Well, so because because I was, when I first originally installed it, I hadn't thought about breaking the plates, because I couldn't use find 18th century white porcelain plates, because they don't exist, because people didn't do plain white in those days, because porcelain was such a status symbol. It was going to be jolly well decorated as well. More is more. And so, and to get this kind of quantity, I really couldn't use historical porcelain. So I went to the total opposite and went to IKEA and got them. But it's amazing. I find it also fascinating in itself that porcelain, which was such an expensive, exclusive material in the 17th and 18th century, has now become something that everybody can have, and you can buy from a stack of 100 in IKEA for £1 a plate. And so I bought a lot of these plates, and then I should have actually broken them in my studio and put them in boxes, but I just took the whole plates with me to the Holborn Museum. When we got there to install it, I realized I had to break all these plates. So we were in the museum, and I got a hammer and started smashing up all these plates in the museum. And it was just amazing how people come running from all corners of the museum when they hear the sound of broken ceramic.
I can't imagine. I think even the sound of the porcelain shards as we kind of sprinkled them on the tables was, as a museum curator who one of her biggest fears is breaking something, that sound alone was a little disarming. So I can't imagine hearing the sound of smashing porcelain plates. I quite love that story.
Well, it was very funny.
And I love, this is an installation that's really evolved. Like, it takes on the character of each venue that it's at, but you've also grown and added to it. And we were just sharing a picture of the flatware that you created and the plates that you created, and that those weren't part of the original installation, kind of came about at other venues.
No, it was just at the original location. It was just the installation, and we actually used porcelain and glassware and cutlery from the permanent collection of the museum, which I've done in several places. But then, as the plates, as you have them now with the profiles, they were done for when it was showing at the Chateau de Nyon in Switzerland. And Nyon, a small city outside Geneva, had a porcelain factory. And so the motifs of those plates were based on, it's an assembly of 3 different designs from that factory, 18th century designs. And so then I got the plates, and then I thought about cutlery, and I thought, well, what, apart from the mushroom cloud nuclear bomb, what is the most destructive weapon there is? And that's the Kalashnikov. I think that's the most produced weapon of the 20th century. So I made a set of cutlery using, and no disrespect to Americans, but sometimes you have the feeling that the right to bear arms is almost more important than the right to have food. So I thought that was quite an interesting point to make with this cutlery.
I think they are the ultimate symbol in their gilded state of brutality and luxury. And it's a wonderful comment. I think I have been.
But as somebody said to me, you probably get an arms dealer wanting to buy them. It's like.
I've been surprised. We've had more than one visitor ask if we were selling these sets in our gift shop. So there's a merchandising opportunity for you. Potentially.
They were not cheap to make, I tell you that.
They're really, really fabulous. I love that we could hear your voice and have you here. If we couldn't have you here in Pittsburgh, have you join us virtually. And I can't thank you enough for joining us. It's almost 11 p.m. in London, so this would be way past my bedtime. Does anyone else have any other questions for Bouke? I guess maybe one question is, what's an upcoming project that you might want to share? Where can we look forward to seeing your work soon?
Well, because of the whole pandemic, it's all going to be a bit horribly quiet. So, but I am working and completing at the moment my first public sculpture, which is for University College London, and it's going to be an outside sculpture, 3 meters high, and that's really quite an amazing step up to do something like that. It's my first public sculpture, so it's really exciting, and it's being made in Madrid at the moment. I'm just waiting for the samples for patination, but it's made by the best company in Europe. So it's really, really, really exciting. But it's, again, because of the pandemic, we've all had to do this remotely. And doing approvals because I can't go to Spain.
I'm sure that's made this much more challenging, though your commute hasn't changed. And I'm sure some of your day-to-day hasn't changed at all. Everything has changed at the same time.
It's very strange not to have traveled. I've traveled once this year, and that's it. And at the beginning, and it's very odd. So, but that public sculpture project is very exciting. I just did a project with Sotheby's, which was the auction house.
I loved it.
Yeah, that was, and that came out of the blue, out of nowhere, about 2 months ago. That had to be done really quickly, but that was to design an entrance to one of the temporary gallery space where they were doing a pop-up gallery, and that was a really fantastic opportunity as well. So things sort of seem to come up and appear here and there, but I'm sort of quite enjoying the not having the pressure and actually really experimenting and making some new things. So far so good.
So everyone can follow you on Instagram, because I know you share a lot of your works in progress and your latest projects. So everyone will have to check you out there because you have beautiful photos and you're one of my favorite things in my feed.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody for being there.
Is there any last minute questions or comments that anyone wants to make? No pressure. Just as John said, we don't want to keep him up too late.
This would be beyond my bedtime, so
yes.
Well, for a special occasion, it's allowed.
Well, thank you for staying up late with us.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And goodbye to everybody there.
Bouke, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for spending your time with us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.